Hola, hope you're well. I know I've been gone for a little while. I quit my job a couple weeks ago and I've just been enjoying it. Taken a few mini road trips, turned up the tunes, gotten out of town, left the past behind me in terms of being a teacher, and I gotta tell you, it feels good. It feels good to not have constant high blood pressure and stress every day you walk into school. It's ridiculous. And I say this without an ounce of sarcasm or untruths. I fear for our future. The educational system in the United States is a fucking disaster. Good luck to all of us, really. Any age group, everyone, good luck, because we fucking need it. All right. I'm going to talk about a group. I didn't see this one coming, really. I have some other groups on deck that I wanted to talk about, but recently I went into my storage unit and I started pulling out. I don't know. I have boxes that they're not alphabetized. Most of my collection are sorted by genre because that's what makes sense in my mind. Some of it's sorted by remixers, but most of it's genre. And I went through some old taped up synth pop, like 80s synth pop boxes recently, and I pulled out a bunch of shit. And Book of Love was in there, and I was like, huh, I haven't heard that in a long time. And I did very much like Book of Love back in the day. And so I recently digitized all of it. I ripped it with my vinyl ripping system and situation here. And I revisited it, and it compelled me and motivated me to do this video. So, you Book of Love fans, I hope you find this video. I've never been a huge Book of Love fan. I haven't heard these records in probably at least 30 years. But this stuff, I was listening to this stuff in high school, and it brought back a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories from that late 80s period when I was in high school, basically. And it reminded me of a lot of things, but I like this music. I think it's aged pretty well. Not all of it. And for what it is, I think it doesn't always work. But in the realm of synth pop music, especially 80s synth pop music, Book of Love were a pretty big band. They had a big following. They were very popular. I saw them live once. So I'm going to talk about the first two albums because those are the two albums I have. I have all the singles from those two albums, and they're right here. I know I don't always show records, but I just digitized all this stuff, and it's right here in hand. So I'm going to briefly talk about what I think of the first two albums of Book of Love, and in my opinion, the only two Book of Love albums you really need to revisit. I revisited what they did after Lullaby, and I don't know, I never got into it. So this is the first album, self-titled, as you can see. And as I was listening to this, I think this album is aged pretty well. I don't think it's aged as well as the next one, Lullaby, their second album. This came out in 1986, by the way. And I think it's aged pretty well. Some of the songs have not aged well. Some of the songs on here I didn't like at all even back then. But I think overall, as an 80s piece of synth pop electronic music, electronica, what a stupid term. I never use that term. What am I doing? As a piece of pop music, let's put it that way. This is pretty good. It's held up well. And these guys were pretty popular, man. Like they supported Depeche Mode. Those of you who didn't know that, you Depeche Mode fans, maybe you didn't know that. I think Book of Love was their opening act on the Black Celebration tour. Am I getting that right? That makes sense in my mind because Black Celebration came out in 1986, right? And that's when this album came out. I think they supported them on their United States leg of the Black Celebration tour in 1986, I think. I didn't see that tour. I was too young, but this group did have a pretty decent following, and it was thanks to things like that. They got promoted by Depeche Mode, which, hey, why not? And they were on the same label in the US. They're both on Sire. So I think that made sense. They got the attention of people like Daniel Miller, who remixed one of their singles here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this album is good. I think the best songs on here tend to be the non-singles. I'll talk about the singles here in a minute. Some of the songs on here are terrible. Like You Make Me Feel So Good, for example, which was chosen as a single here in the United States. I think that song is absolutely terrible. I didn't think it was good then, and it's worse now. Not a good song. It's like it was B-side fodder at best. How they chose that song to be a single, even in, much less even on the album, was always kind of a head scratcher to me. It has not aged well. But most of the rest of the album works pretty well. Modigliani, you guys know Modigliani. Anyone who's seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, you know that song. I think people who don't think they know that song, you unconsciously, unknowingly know that song. It was it was like the main theme song in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and that is a good song. It's held up well. Let's see. Still Angry is a good song. Again, I think the best songs on here are the songs that are not singles. Lost Souls, I don't know how that wasn't a single in itself. Lost Souls is a great song. I Touch Roses is a great song. Boy has aged really well. Boy is the big song that we all know. Book of Love, the title track from the self-titled album, is excellent. This is aged pretty damn well, I think. For an 80s synth pop band, not all of that ages well. I think this does. I'll pull this out of the sleeve and just show the inner sleeve. This is the US pressing. Here you go. I think these guys were from Philadelphia, right? They were from Philadelphia, somewhere in Pennsylvania initially, and then they migrated to New York. I met these guys actually when I saw them live, just for a couple minutes. I'll get into that in a minute, but. And then here's the label. There's nothing much to see. I'm not going to show all the labels to all these records. All of these records I'm showing are US presses on Sire. So they're all going to have this label. There's the label. Anything on Sire back in the 80s had that same label. They all look the same. So this first album, I think, is very good. It's aged very well. What do you think? If you're watching this and you're an old-time Book of Love fan, as I am, how do you feel about this record now when you listen to it? Is it something you still enjoy? Do you like it? I was pleased with it. Again, songs like You Make Me Feel So Good, I don't understand how that was chosen as a single. I think Lost Souls, excuse me, Lost Souls should have been a single. Even Book of Love, the track, should have been a single. There are plenty of other songs on that album I think are more pop-tastic than You Make Me Feel So Good. Here's Boy. And this was the cut that came out prior to the album. I think there are a couple. The next single, I think there are two singles that came before the album release and then two that came after. I apologize if I'm screwing that up. Someone out there will probably correct me, as people love to do. I make one tiny little mistake and people jump all over my ass for it. But here's the Boy single. It's got a slightly extended version and a dub mix on it. The remixes really aren't all that. They're not even really remixes. They're just kind of edits. One very minimally extended edit version, and then the other is just a dub. But still a good track, very much worthy of a single. Here's I Touch Roses. This probably is my favorite single from the album. I think this song's really held up well. Still sounds good. Very cool track. Just has one extended version, and then it has an album version of I Touch Roses, and then the album version of Lost Souls. When this came out, though, Lost Souls wasn't released yet, because that was on the album, and the album hadn't come out. So it does have that extended version, though, which is cool. This is You Make Me Feel So Good. Just, yeah, I don't know how they chose this as a single. Very weak, very lame, very goofy. Book of Love were goofy, though, and I'll talk about that here. Their lyrics are pretty goofy. For me, the reason to have this is the Lost Souls remix. They did remix that, and then Daniel Miller steps up and remixes I Touch Roses, which is better than the album version, I think. The two remixes of You Make Me Feel So Good are just, well. Never liked this song, but the Daniel Miller remix is excellent. That one is held up better than any Book of Love track from this first album, I think. It makes me wonder what they could have accomplished if they had brought Daniel Miller in to do the whole album, to mix the whole album. That would have been cool. And then this is Modigliani. I'm pretty sure these last two singles came after the album had been released. And you just get some various remixes of Modigliani. You see, you get the dub. You get that Requiem Mass, which was very heavily used in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's basically like a beatless, more ethereal version of it. But this is a good single. It's aged pretty well. It always makes me think of the movie. Always makes me think of John Hughes. If you grew up in the 80s and you watched John Hughes movies like we all did, hearing this always makes you think of John Hughes, I think. So this is the second album, and like I said before, I'm only going to be talking about these guys up through this second album. This is Lullaby. This album has aged really well, I think. And this was always the album I thought was their best anyway. But listening to it now in 2024, I think it's aged really damn well. And this is produced by Flood, none other than Flood. If you don't know who Flood is, come on, where have you been? He's produced everybody. Depeche Mode, Erasure, Nine Inch Nails, U2, PJ Harvey. The dude is a heavyweight, arguably the best producer out there, barring people like Brian Eno, who he's worked with. Flood is a master producer. He produced and mixed Violator, okay? I mean, really, that's the only thing you need to know about the guy. He is a genius at what he does. And this is something he produced. 1988, Book of Love, Lullaby. Excellent record. I think my favorite song, again, my favorite songs on here tend to be the songs that are not the singles. Like, I think Sea of Tranquility is excellent. Was it, no, Champagne Wishes was the one song that didn't age well on here. I think the rest of them have. I think You Look Through Me is a great song. Witchcraft is a single, and I think that's a fantastic track. Definitely the best single on the album, in my humble opinion. One song I just kind of, even back then, I thought it was a little heavy-handed with a little love. It's when the dude in the band, Ted Ottaviano, which, by the way, there are two Ottaviano people in this band. Susan Ottaviano and Ted Ottaviano. You spell those last names the same way, and they are not married. They're not related. Like, what are the fucking odds of that? Anyway, I always thought they were, and then recently I looked it up and it said no, they're not related. I'm like, wow, what are the odds of that happening? But Susan Ottaviano obviously was the vocalist, but then he sang on this song here, and boy, the music's cool, but the vocals are hard to sit through, man. He just repeats this over and over for 4 minutes, basically. The production's really cool, though. It sounds like he's singing in a cathedral or something, like he's singing in a church. And so the acoustics are really cool, and the music sounds like, it just sounds cool. But then his voice, it's like, we need somebody else singing this song. That's what I'm trying to say. And that reminds me of lyrics with this band. I've read a couple of things on the internet that say this band was revolutionary with their lyrics because they talked about AIDS, and like Pretty Boys and Pretty Girls was, I guess it says it was one of the first songs that openly talked about AIDS and stuff. And that's cool. I mean, in the 80s, AIDS was still a major threat and people didn't understand it yet. And if you had AIDS, you died, unlike now. But I think we need to pump the brakes on any argument saying that these guys were brilliant lyricists. No, they were not. The lyrics, Book of Love lyrics are ridiculously bad, but that was part of their charm. They sang about dopey, stupid, goofy, lovey-dovey stuff, but then they also sang about witchcraft, and they sang, like, they had their lyrics were very fairy tale driven. And I think that was part of the allure. I mean, maybe I'm getting that wrong, but what I remember, people kind of liked these guys because they were unique in that way. They had slightly different lyrics. And they were goofy. And yeah, but when I read read people online say that they were revolutionary for their lyrics, it's calm down with that. No, they weren't. Lyrically, these guys are a joke, and I think that was part of their charm. And I think they knew that. I don't think that's a major insult to say that. Their lyrics are pretty terrible by and large. Here's the inner sleeve. I'll show that to you. I'm not going to show you the label. It's just another boring Sire label. This is the U.S. pressing. This album has aged really well, I think. Really love it. The only exception is Champagne Wishes. That song is I didn't really like it then. It's got that "You Make Me Feel So Good" vibe to it. Kind of this happy, skippy beat, and I don't know. Not a good song. B-side fodder at the very best. But the rest of the record is really good. I think it's aged very well. And again, in the vast, amazing pantheon of Flood-produced records. I think it's probably why this album has aged pretty damn well. Flood's on here. Apologies to the band members, but you had Flood working with you. That's not a bad thing. That definitely helps your longevity, I think. Here is the first single released from the record, Pretty Boys and Pretty Girls. This samples The Exorcist, Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. And I like this 12-inch because it uses more Exorcist samples on it on the 12-inch mix. You hear more of Reagan screaming and kind of spooky, kind of a spooky song. Good remixes here too. Good stuff. And yeah, the lyrics, this is one of those instances where the lyrics are both good and bad. Like they're political and pointed in their way, but then they're also just really hokey and corny. Sorry, it's just my opinion, but yeah, I don't think of when I think of Book of Love, I don't think of brilliant lyrics, okay? Here's the second single from the album. This is Lullaby, the track. And this might, well, I don't know. Witchcraft would be close, but I really love the remixes here. This song was remixed by the great Justin Strauss. And I'm going to be doing a video on that guy. I think Justin Strauss is one of those Mount Rushmore remixers. He is one of those kings of remixing that doesn't get he doesn't get his due. Justin Strauss was someone who remixed a lot in the 80s. And he helped kind of just define what remixing is. So, yeah, good stuff. I've got people texting me that I don't recognize. I don't know what's going on here. Book of Love, Lullaby. Here we go. This is a good 12-inch. Justin Strauss. Yes. And then they put oranges and lemons on there. It's the same. It's the album version. I don't know. Can you remix that? You're putting album versions on 12 inches that already exist on other albums? Like, come on. Give some exclusive material, man. And then what I think is the best 12-inch, Witchcraft. Book of Love. This is a really fun song. It samples the TV show Bewitched for obvious reasons. The remixes are good. This is a solid 12-inch. I was ripping this on my system, and the bass is really loud, and it's just aged really well. This track could have come out today, I think, and it would still sound fresh. This is an excellent song, Witchcraft. The third and final single from Lullaby, which I think is their best album. No doubt about it. Here it is, Witchcraft, Book of Love. Now, yeah, I met these guys briefly back in, I think it was 1991 or 2. They had just released Candy Carol, their third album, which I'm not going to talk about because I've never liked it. I think after Lullaby, they just kind of, I don't know, they kind of lost it for my taste. I never really got back into them after Lullaby. But I met them, they played live, and they were playing to a backing tape, obviously. They didn't have any live instrumentation. They were just basically playing to backing tapes. And the backing tape broke. They're up on stage singing and dancing, and all of a sudden it just went silent. And everybody's just like, what the fuck? And I'll never forget Ted Ottaviano kind of looking out at the crowd, smiling sheepishly, kind of like, sorry. But he had a good sense of humor about it. He's like, this is what we do. I mean, obviously we're playing the backing tape. So the crowd didn't get pissed off. They just kind of laughed. And a good 5 minutes went by where they had to scramble to get the sound back up. But it finally came back up and the crowd cheered and they started singing again. But I met them briefly after the show. And I'll never forget Susan Aviano. I just said hello to her and we talked for a minute. And I just remember her accent. Because when you hear her sing, you don't hear an accent, but she had this heavy, like New York accent. It was really heavy. I just remember at that point in my life, I hadn't heard a lot of New York accents right in front of me. So I was hearing this heavy East Coast accent. I was like, wow. It's it's just an aside. It doesn't mean anything. I just remember that's one of the things that really sticks out of my mind. It was like this heavy New York accent. I remember thinking, I don't hear that on the records. Probably a good thing. But anyway, just a side story to this band. I like Book of Love. I was happy revisiting this stuff. I think this is their gem right here. If you were to pick anything up from these guys and you didn't know them, I would start here. Lullaby. It's a good song. It's a good album. It's a good song too. This is a good album that's aged well. And if you're interested in the history of 80s electronic music anyway, electronic pop music, Flood's on here. Flood is a major player in the evolution of electronic dance music. So I think in that way, I think this is worth your time listening to. I think a lot of you will just hear this and be like, oh, that's some really cheesy, corny 80s pop music. And it is, but it's fun. Open your mind up a little bit if you've never heard this and check this out. I think it's worth it. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time. See you later.